Statements made in presentations given at VMworld, which are not statements of historical fact, are forward-looking statements based upon current expectations. Actual results could differ materially from those projected in the forward-looking statements. Information regarding risk factors that could cause actual results to materially differ are contained in documents filed by VMware with the Securities and Exchange Commission, including reports that VMware may file with the SEC from time to time on periodic reports on Form 10Q and Form 10K and current reports on Form 8K. VMware disclaims any obligation to update any such forward-looking statements after the date of this presentation.
Hey, give me some backbeat. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Now give me some bass down low. Hey, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Rick Jackson.
Outstanding. By the way, these are real drums built into these letters up here. Fantastic, guys. Awesome. Thank you so much. Hey, welcome to VMworld 2012, and welcome to sunny Barcelona. For those of you interested, I did just check the weather backstage, and it is going to get to 11 degrees in Copenhagen. I think we're in the right spot. So we've got over 8,000 registered people here this week, which is fantastic. I think we have a tremendous amount to share with you over the week. Should be great. But first, I want to say thank you, and thank you, and thank you to our partners. Those partners that make this event possible year after year, allow us to come and share the time together, share information, tips and tricks, new technologies, etc. Please be sure and visit those partners in the Solution Exchange. I find that the floor of the Solution Exchange is one of the most comprehensive floors you'll see in the IT industry, where you could literally take a shopping cart and build an entire data center out of what is on that floor. So a great opportunity to spend some time with the sponsors. Quite an event for you, starting today, obviously, with this morning's keynotes. Following the keynotes, we're going to have our spotlight session starting. VMware spotlight session about noon today is all about how we manage and bring innovation to life inside of VMware. Very popular session at VMworld in the US. This is also the day that we kick off our spotlight sessions with our global diamond sponsors and platinum sponsors. On Wednesday, don't forget, we have another keynote tomorrow morning. Our own Steve Herrod will be talking about what it's like to work in the new era of IT in a multi-device world, and how we are going to simplify that experience in a secure fashion for all employees. And then, of course, after the general session, we'll continue with the spotlight sessions. Multi-cloud management. It is a world filled of heterogeneous environments, multiple clouds. You're trying to piece it all together. How do you make it work for your business? Come see the spotlight session. Let us show what we can do to help you there. And then finally, a session targeted at small to medium businesses, those with not as many deep resources as large enterprise IT organizations, but with all the same requirements. Let us talk to you about solutions for the small IT shop. And then again, our sponsors and their spotlight sessions continuing on Wednesday. Wednesday night is the party night. They tell me they're going to transform this room into the Pixelator experience. Hey, I'm just reading the cue cards. I have no idea what that means. Let's just cut to the chase. Free booze, free food. We'll see you Wednesday night. Thursday, the sessions continue, online labs. We know that a lot of you love to take the labs, and we're serving them all up from the cloud. Great opportunity to experience the technology firsthand that we're talking about this week, while also learning about some of the new products. VMware User Group, an independent community of dedicated, knowledgeable, passionate people who want to take the experience of peer-to-peer networking and sharing of best practices from VMworld out throughout the rest of the year. We now have over 75,000 members worldwide in VBUG. And here in Europe, we have 45 local chapters. So they will be out on the Solutions Exchange floor. Great opportunity to look at signing up for a local chapter in your area, or if you're interested in starting one, they would welcome the opportunity to work with you. So lastly, stay connected this week. Hashtag VMworld for Twitter. You've got the VMworld mobile app. You'll want to download that. Make sure you have that available. Tomorrow in the general session, you'll be using that app for some audience polling that we'll be doing during tomorrow's session. And then lastly, catch all the highlights of the day on the VMworld TV channel on YouTube. So next, I'd like to bring out a gentleman who has a long, outstanding partnership with VMware. As someone responsible for the x86 business at Intel, helping create probably one of the most profound technology partnerships of the modern IT era between Intel and VMware. Continue to be such a strong supporter and great partner at EMC, and now Chief Executive Officer of VMware. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Pat Gelsinger. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It is truly a pleasure, honor to be a CEO of such a great company as VMware, and to be able to leading that team, but more importantly, to be able to partner with you, right, our customers and our partners here. And while I've had the privilege of participating in VMworld, first from my Intel capacity, and then as part of EMC, and now as part of VMware, right, in the US, I've never participated in a European VMworld. And I've heard that you guys are even louder, rowdier, and more excited about VMware than your US counterparts. Is that the case? Come on, is that the case? Yeah! Well, let's try that one more time. Come on, it's in Barcelona. What a beautiful place. Are you a louder, rowdier, and more excited group than the US folks are? Yeah! It truly is a pleasure to be here with you today, and looking forward to a great and long-term relationship with Europe VMware users. Thank you very much. We see the IT industry in a fundamental state of change. And this wave of disruption that we see driven by the cloud computing era. And if you look back over history, the period of mainframe computers, in 1989, I wrote a paper that declared the death of mainframes, right? And while eventually, right, but more importantly, the nexus of innovation moved on to the mini-computer era. And over the last 3 years at EMC headquarters, we look out over the remains of the mini-computer era, seeing the buildings that used to be occupied by DEC and Data General. And then the PC and processor era. And, Paul Maritz and myself, he was Mr. Win and I was Mr. Tell. And for decades working on this PC and microprocessor era. And then into the network and distributed computing, and now the cloud era. And we see cloud as so disruptive because it's fundamentally changing every aspect of how we build and operate the data center, not just at the technology level, but also the business level and how IT is operated, and offering new levels of business agility and IT efficiency that were never possible before. Right, and against this, we see that IT is in this shift of fundamental maturing that's occurring today. And we see that, right, IT has been in this reactive state where the large majority of budget is spent just on keeping things running, right, and responding to this long queue, right, of demands. And we're moving into the proactive state where IT is now this always ready, right, infrastructure with service catalogs that are increasingly on demand and self-service. And finally, we see that our goal is to make the IT infrastructure a platform for innovation, where the IT investment is focused on business innovation, new applications, and big data, and these apps that fundamentally allow us to be a business partner and enable new degrees of business innovation. We see this period of disruption as top to bottom, right, at the infrastructure level, at the application level, and finally at the access level. And against this, we see the 3 layers of the strategy that VMware's been describing. And I see my role is to embrace, right, and continue those layers of transformation, but refine and accelerate the execution of that strategy into the future. So let's look at each of those layers in the course of our conversation today. And we'll start by drilling down and looking at the infrastructure layer. And now from the VMware capacity, I'm really excited about the infrastructure aspects because for 30 years at Intel, I was building that underlying hardware infrastructure, the multi-core x86 infrastructure that we're building on, right? And I was sort of always the hardware guy looking up at the software. And I sort of like this view of the software guy looking down at the hardware. It's a much more pleasant view, right? And to me, it's sort of flipping the coin over and being able to drive the other half of the innovation of the next stage of the infrastructure build out for the future. It's exciting to be on the software side of this as we build out this next generation of infrastructure. And the progress that you have made is really quite tremendous. And over the last 4 years, moving from maybe about 25% virtualized, and today estimates are that we're about 60% virtualized today. But I'd look forward and say over the next 3 or 4 years, can we get to maybe 90+% virtualized, where there's the rare exception of a workload that isn't running fully virtualized? You know, just a few of those leftover pieces that are stuck in the corner that we don't care about and never worth moving forward to a modern infrastructure, but those become the rare exception of what we do. And it's not just the fact of how much is virtualized, but it's also the flexibility that this new infrastructure provides, where we've gone from weeks to deliver, right, to days or hours, and we've done a tremendous job with virtualization at the compute and the memory level, right, but we need to make all aspects of infrastructure flexible and easily provisioned, where an entire set of services is minutes or seconds in the future. So what's it take for us to get there? Well, clearly we saw in the physical world that we were limited by the weeks, months, if not quarters, if we needed to go through a procurement cycle. And in the virtual world, we're substantially better. As just a few clicks and a few seconds later, I've been able to provision a VM. Right? It's almost instantaneous today. But as good as the compute and the memory is, we're still limited in many cases by physical aspects of networking configurations, security policies, firewall configurations. And what if those were as easy to provision and enable as the VM was? And in fact, they became automatic, policy-driven, and self-service as part of the provisioning of the VM itself. And this is what we think about when we think of the virtual data center, that all of those services become part of the VM itself. Now the question is it possible? And this is at the heart of what we believe the software-defined data center is. And look carefully at this definition. Our Steve Herrod, our next speaker, he worked on every syllable of this definition, so hopefully you would enjoy it as much as Steve does. But that all infrastructure, every aspect, is virtualized, not just compute and memory, but all other functions as well, right? Is delivered as a service, so they're all enabled as an on-demand service. And the data center and the control of this data center is entirely automated by software. And this is what we think about as the software-defined data center. In 2007, I had the privilege from my Intel capacity to come and speak to VMworld in 2007. And right as I was part of that conference then, I suggested that the vision for VMware then should be to deliver the data center-wide operating system of the future. And little did I know that we'd call it the software-defined data center, but in 2007, that gem of an idea that there'd be an operating system level that transcended the entire data center and all the services that were part of it, right? And we see that today that these pieces are starting to come together and that the industry is headed this way. And now's the time to pull this together and enable the software-defined data center. When we walk into the data center today, it sort of looks like a museum of IT past, right? We see that there's the layer, right, of the mainframes and the databases and these mission-critical environments. And while we've made substantial progress virtualizing the Windows and Linux world, right, we still see all of these pieces of the data center still being this museum of IT past. We have database vendors today arguing that yet another vertical stack needs to be put in place. Mainframe vendors arguing that the only way to truly deliver mission-critical environments is yet with their vertical stack. High-performance computing arguing that, gosh, we can't afford any latency. We can't afford any aspect, right, of overhead. And even yet today, we're building yet the next proprietary infrastructure, right, with Hadoop. right? And saying, yet again, we need yet another proprietary infrastructure. And against that, we say, this is what's led us to have the vast majority of the data center spend just keeping the lights on, because all of these vertical stacks are expensive, rigid, right, and difficult to manage. And thus, we need to go back to the premises of what virtualization was all about. That first, we abstract. We establish this layer of abstraction. Second, we pool all of the infrastructure components underneath that. And then finally, we automate. And we need to do that for all elements, right, of the data center. And we need to establish an on-demand service, this just-in-time service creation. This is the premise of the software-defined data center. One common platform for all data center services for both existing as well as new applications. Now, can it be done? This is exactly what's driving VMware. And our VCloud suite, right, was the intention to establish a suite we announced last year at VMworld. And this year, we're very happy to announce the first integrated VCloud suite to deliver against this promise of the software-defined data center. We start with the proven virtualization infrastructure, VMware vSphere, right? And this has been substantially extended beyond just CPU and memory to become a complete cloud infrastructure that now includes networking and security services, also includes storage pools, right, and that are defined by policies and app requirements. Also, standardized service catalog with self-service capabilities to deliver these infrastructure components on demand. A new approach to management that's purpose-built for the cloud era versus traditional scripting and automating of software. And finally, we need to federate these environments with other pools of infrastructure. Bringing all of these components together, we're happy to announce the first and only complete suite for the cloud infrastructure of today. The vCloud suite is unmatched in the marketplace. First, its comprehensiveness. As others would come into the marketplace saying, we have a VM as well, now we have a complete suite of capabilities for this full and comprehensive set of services, the most complete offering in the market. Second is, we continue to be the highest performance in the marketplace, the highest VM density, the lowest overhead, the highest performance, least jitter, least latency. And this is now in its 9th major release, continuing our yearly cadence of offerings into the marketplace, predictable delivery of breakthrough performance. It is the most proven. We're 100% of the Fortune 500, 100% of the Global 100, over 400,000 customers for this proven infrastructure today. IDC estimates that greater than 60% of all x86 is running virtual today. Gartner estimates that over 80% is running on VMware. So doing the math, over 50% of all workloads today running on the VMware vSphere infrastructure today. Simply tremendous progress, adoption, reliability, performance, and comprehensive solution in the marketplace today. How many of you liked VRAM? I'm looking. Anybody? Well, we're very happy to announce the death of this word. Are you excited? Right? No more VRAM. And while we like to put V in front of almost every, and I'm learning a whole new dictionary as part of, V this, V that, right? I'm learning, this is now a dirty 4-letter word, right? VRAM is now out of the dictionary. You spoke and we listened. And while at one point we thought this might be a good idea, you clearly told us it wasn't. So we listened, we've stricken this from the vocabulary, and fundamentally, a simple, easy solution, one integrated solution, with no more VRAM entitlements, no more core entitlements, no per VM pricing components, all one simple, easy licensing model, per CPU, per socket licensing, easy to buy, complete suite, easy to install, and easy to operate. You spoke, we listened, thank you for the feedback, and we want to be unquestionably your best supplier and partner going forward. And continuing this tremendous success and momentum, we need to listen to what you tell us. The new VCloud suite has gotten tremendous positive response from the marketplace. And you see some of the accolades from some of the different press and analysts that are up here on the slide. But even most importantly is what we've heard from you, the customers, who said this is a big step forward, excitement and opportunity as part of the VCloud suite, where we've clearly had the fastest uptake, earliest installs, most rapid adoption for a new product from VMware. And we thank you for your continuing passion for the technologies and products that we build. But as we think about the VCloud suite that we rolled out at VMworld US, there was one piece of it that we hadn't delivered on yet. You remember the rules of the software-defined data center: abstract, pool, and automate. And our fundamental approach to management is less management and more automation. And maybe, in some ways, the least sexy piece of it is the management aspects, these automation aspects. It's fun to talk about the bits and the bytes of CPU, memory, of network and storage, right? But maybe the most important is how we deliver the management technologies, that we allow IT to increasingly become this broker, right, of services for the future. This management environment purpose-built for the cloud. And against it, we see that it needs to be multi-platform, right? And you'll hear more about our broadening of our strategy to be multi-platform, hybrid, right, with a broader and broader set of providers for the cloud of the future. Purpose-built management environment for the cloud. If we look backward, traditional IT management was uniquely associated, right, with those individual stacks of IT, where each stack would have its own management environment, right, that had tightly coupled to an individual silo, right, through loosely coordinated but dedicated scripting associated and managed for each one of those. Right? In the world of the cloud, this must change, where the application is fundamentally abstracted, right, from the underlying infrastructure. We need policy-based coordination and automation enabled by this intelligent infrastructure, uniquely designed for the cloud era. And today, we're delighted to announce the next generation management suite for the cloud, a comprehensive portfolio of management technologies that deliver three promises. One is service provisioning, automated, policy-based provisioning of both infrastructure and applications. Second, operations management, automated operation of those infrastructures, resources. And finally, business management. Give me visibility, cost, quality metrics operating against it. Starting with service provisioning, we're happy to extend our provisioning suite by the VCloud Automation Center. This comes to us through the Dynamic Ops acquisition. Policy-based approach to automating the governance, sourcing, provisioning of infrastructure for both desktop as well as data center and heterogeneous cloud resources. Second is a new release of vFabric Application Director, being able to do application provisioning and release automation for multi-tier applications and hybrid cloud environments. Second, operations management, right, which simplifies and automates the operations management, right, of the multi-tier application infrastructure for hybrid cloud environments. Fundamentally, operations management has become a big data problem, with a tremendous amount of log and analytic and predictive insight requirements against it. And finally, business management suite, providing transparency and control, right, of IT costs, services, and quality with our IT business management suite. Today, a major announcement of the IT cloud management suite of the future, a comprehensive portfolio of new products and technologies bringing out today to complete the VCloud suite. So with this, right, we have a complete set. We announced the underlying technology components of vSphere, of storage, management, networking at VMworld US. Today, completing that with the management technologies to go with that. A complete set of vCenter operations and management technologies today being made available broadly in the industry. But what we've heard is that it's not just about the technology, but it's also what you do with it. So as excited as we are with the VCloud suite and our new cloud architecture toolkit, tools to help and describe how to take advantage of this, we've heard from our customers that it's even more important to start addressing the question of how do you operate it? What is required to take advantage of all of these technologies? And with that, we're very happy to announce our Cloud Ops education, IP, and service partnership. First, process control. Readiness assessment tools for how to build and deliver these. A set of advisory services that enable customers and partners to be able to guide you and our customers in terms of how to take advantage of these new tools and technologies. But it's also the people, the culture, and the org. Increasingly, we're seeing that customers run up against the limitations where how they organize IT is almost as important as the technologies that are in IT. And if your organization is built on those same vertical silos, adoption of new cloud operations model becomes limited by the organizational model. So what are the best practices for organization? Also, new role-based certifications, allowing you to become certified cloud delivery specialists in different areas and continue to advance your careers with new training and new certifications. And finally is the business management aspects, the dollars and cents, the tools that enable the justification of these new technologies into the environment, new financial models and CIO scorecards. Together, the tools, the services, the IP that allow you to navigate this disruptive change into the cloud era. But we can't do this alone. And thus, we're also announcing the Cloud Ops Forum, together with some of the leading IT advisory firms in the industry who are partnering with us to take this set of certifications, IP, tools, and services, and broadly enable these into the industry and to partner this competence with you to guide in this transformation to this new cloud era. We also listen to your feedback and understanding that it truly is a multi-cloud world. And as hard as we are working, and many of you are driving your own organizations, that there are still these pockets of heterogeneous infrastructure. There are still portions, and maybe via acquisition, maybe long transition cycles where you just can't have everything in a homogeneous VMware environment. And with that, we are committed to extending and accelerating our offerings for this multi-cloud world. Cloud Foundry, the one and the only multi-cloud PaaS environment in the industry to enable next-generation multi-cloud application development that's hosted certainly on VMware, but also on other infrastructure like Amazon as well. Second is our extension of our service provisioning and our management layers, dynamic ops, and part of what motivated us to pursue this acquisition was in fact their leadership with regard to multi-cloud operations management. And with that, we're extending our vCloud Director, with Dynamic Ops, so that we're able to present a uniform storefront for delivery of workloads onto multi-cloud, any cloud environments in the future. And finally, Nicira. Nicira was the leading OpenStack virtual networking technology in the industry, and combining that with what we were already driving with vCNS, and our VXLAN and vShield initiatives, we unquestionably have the most complete set of offerings for both VMware environments as well as for OpenStacks and other cloud environments of the future, and bringing those together, a complete set of multi-cloud networking technologies. And on this page, you see an incredible investment, almost $2 billion of acquisitions on the part of VMware to unquestionably deliver this message that we will be delivering a multi-cloud world, a leading-edge sets of technologies for a heterogeneous environment into the future. Unquestionably, VMware is committed to a multi-cloud world. So we've looked at the infrastructure layer, a simple, powerful vision of the software-defined data center, but also at the application level. And with this, we've had some significant updates this year with our vFabric platform. We updated in the second quarter of this year, the premier platform for Spring Java development in the future. Also investments in big and fast data. Our Cloud Foundry that we're just referring to, the open cloud PaaS offering, is gaining significant momentum. This year alone, 160% growth in downloads and over 30 active partners building and delivering PaaS services with Cloud Foundry. Beta today will go to GA later this quarter, and in 2013 we will have the private cloud versions, e.g. on both sides of the firewall versions of the Cloud Foundry offering. Similarly, at the access level, View is gaining significant momentum, gaining share at maybe twice the rate of our competitors. Right, we also extended our offerings here by the acquisition of Winova and their Mirage products. And now we're able to centrally manage, right, and deliver, right, environments for all PCs, not just virtual ones with View, right, but physical ones, thick, thin, virtual, physical PC workloads into the future. All of them now able to have an offering that manages them centrally with the Mirage technologies. Similarly, Horizon is the broker for the cloud era, a single-stop access for apps, data, desktops, and services across the full range, this ever-broadening set of devices that we manage inside of the zoo. And tomorrow morning, you'll hear much more about this from Steve Herrod as he takes a peek into the future of end-user computing. So we've seen this top-to-bottom transformation, this period of the most disruptive environment of the IT industry that we've been in for the last 40 years. Fundamentally, right, a new environment for IT is emerging before our very eyes, at the infrastructure, at the applications, and finally at the access level, right here, right now. But one more thing. Fundamentally, it's not possible without you. And as the new CEO for VMware, right, I'm committed to carrying on the strategy that Paul and the VMware leadership team formed, but also the same industry structure, with VMware continuing as an independent company driving forward into the industry with a unique culture, unique products, unique partnerships as well. Over my 30 years at Intel, I learned much about working with the partner community, as fundamentally Intel had the same partner community as VMware does. And I'm deeply invested and committed to delivering on and enabling a broad and powerful partner ecosystem of technologies, solutions, and products with and for all of you. So I thank you for this great privilege that I personally have, but even more importantly, the great opportunities that together we have for the future. It's now my privilege to introduce Steve Herrod. Right, Steve is someone who's well known to you. He's bright, articulate, good-looking, rich. Boy, he got the whole package, doesn't he? And fundamentally, Steve is a great and passionate leader for VMware. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning. That was a nice introduction. Wow. It's a privilege to be here again and get to talk to you about the technical details behind what we're delivering, and to represent more than 2,500 employees from VMware around all of Europe. We also have several hundred engineers scattered across the continent, and many of them worked on the core management products that Pat referred to here. So without further ado, I'd like to dive right in. And as Pat said, we're working across a lot of very exciting areas in the IT industry today. And we're going to dive directly into infrastructure today, where some incredible things are happening with the VCloud suite. And I think you'll also be excited about a number of things going around multi-cloud and how we're really embracing the notion that there are heterogeneous pools of infrastructure out there that we need to have interacting in ways that we haven't worked on in the past. So in San Francisco, we launched the new VCloud suite. And this is the results of a lot of work over the last couple of years. Those of you that attended this event heard about the notion of bringing things together as a suite, where we had common installation, really brought a common look and feel, and pulled together databases and other pieces of it. Make no doubt about it, this is really our focus on delivering the promise of the software-defined data center. And today we're already adding to this new suite that we just launched in very substantial ways. So I wanted to go into the technical details on each of these. You'll be able to see a lot of this at the breakout sessions in the hands-on labs, but we're going to go piece by piece and just give you a flavor for what's going on in the new offering we have here. So it all starts with the core, which is vSphere, something we've been working on for many years now, and it's the foundation of all the work we work on. The goal of this layer is really to be the core that runs all those applications, and it has to provide reliability, security, and certainly performance for whatever you want to do. And we're pushing forward amazingly aggressively on this. We still have many, many hundreds of engineers working on making that core virtualization platform the thing that you can trust for all your applications. And it all starts with these applications as well. We're really focusing right now as people go from 60% virtualized on to making sure the most business critical applications that they have are not only great to run on top of this, but can be better even than in physical implementations. And again, this is technology work. It's making sure that the platform is performant and secure and available. But a lot of it also is working with our partners to make sure people understand how to do this. So you see a lot of work going on these days with best practices, with scaling guides, all sorts of things around sizing as well. And you can see this in some of the early results that we have that I'll show you in a moment. But with this new vCloud suite, we're raising the bar even higher. So last year we had a little fun with a monster VM, and a lot of you remember him, I think. In fact, there's some of you in here that created a Facebook page for this little guy, and he has more friends than I do, which is sad. But anyway, we took it a little bit farther this year. And with the new suite, we've raised the size of this even bigger, so you can see he's a little more muscular. 64 virtual CPUs within each virtual machine, a terabyte of memory. And what I'm most excited about is that an individual virtual machine at this point can do more than 1 million IOPS. And this is really a big achievement that comes to a combination of hardware innovation as well as the work we've been doing on the platform. Now, the core of this is to make it ready for the most demanding of applications. And in addition to all the core performance work, we've done a lot of things around NUMA awareness, performance counters, and everything you need to do to run and to monitor your applications as they move forward. We also track in our customer base quite a bit how well it's working. And so this is just a quick graph that shows from our existing customer base of all of the instances they have of these most critical applications, how many are now running virtualized. And so you can see as our customers get more and more comfortable running in a virtual machine, understanding the sizing, seeing how they can get higher levels of availability, they'll move even more instances of those workloads into virtual machines. So again, this is the core mission of getting business critical apps into this new vCloud suite, and we're quite proud of the progress. But I like how Pat talked about this as well. We're not only looking at today's applications, but we also want to work on tomorrow's applications at the same time. And the promise is to have a single platform that is the best place to run all of these. And if we can do this right, we avoid those silos that you're creating today. And we want to have one platform where you can run everything. So we spend quite a bit of time in engineering right now looking at new applications and really seeing what we can do to make them run even better when they're on top of this vSphere base. Let me just give you a couple of examples. I'm particularly excited about a lot of work going on around the telco space right now. So we've achieved a point in time now where we can give promises of very strong latency, and jitter concerns can go away, allowing us to do voice over IP applications. Or even increasingly, we're seeing the ability to do processing of mobile protocols. And again, this is really an exciting thing I didn't think was possible just a couple of years ago. And it's another class of application that you'll be able to run on this shared infrastructure that we've created. We refer to vFabric. So as we look at modern middleware and the way that you're rewriting enterprise applications, we're looking at how to do self-scaling and making sure that memory management can be coordinated across Java and across the core platform. We're even seeing high-performance computing come about, and people increasingly run it on this shared infrastructure. In addition to getting the performance down very low, the promise for these is that you can actually scale to use as much of that shared infrastructure as possible. In general, these large batch applications either have not enough capacity, or you're not using it and that capacity is wasted. So if you can eat out of a common pool of hardware, then ultimately you're going to be more efficient. Pat referred to Cloud Foundry also. We're seeing a lot of excitement about this, and I'll refer to this at the end. But this really is an interesting way of doing open platform as a service and allowing people to write applications even more simply, and a trend that we see is really where applications are going. And last but not least is something that is today creating silos in many organizations we meet, which is the look at big data. In San Francisco, we showed for the first time something called Project Serengeti, which is an open source approach to allowing Hadoop to run particularly well on top of the vSphere base. It takes away some of the challenges of initial configuration. It can make some of the more vulnerable nodes in a Hadoop cluster be higher levels of availability. And again, ultimately, it can provide elasticity for when you're running these applications. So we are quite focused on making sure that not only today's business critical applications, but a lot of those new applications are going to do great on this platform. Now let's talk about storage for a moment. Last year in Copenhagen, we actually spent a fair amount of time talking about how storage should work in this new world. And we showed really a way to avoid the use of spreadsheets that you might be doing today. We can do automatic placement of applications, knowing what type of I/O demands they have, and also taking into account what capacity is available on your arrays. We also showed Site Recovery Manager, which is a really great way to provide disaster recovery in a world that really needs it a lot more than ever before. So we've done even more in this new VCloud suite, and I'm going to show you just a couple of things that are coming about. Now, most of you have used vMotion for some capability today, a great way to do scheduled downtime, good for doing automatic load balancing. But with vMotion today, we require that you have shared storage. You have to have an array that 2 servers are actually connected to in order to move it. Well, with the new 5.1 suite, we're able to provide live migration of virtual machines without requiring that piece of shared storage. We can take advantage of local disks that would be on servers, or we could have individual arrays that are attached to them and still enable this movement of virtual machines. And if you think about the software-defined data center, it really is about restricting and getting rid of anything that is physical that you have to know about when you're doing topology and allowing things to move around fluidly. So with this new approach, we'll be able to do at a very high performance virtual machines between any of the arrays that you might be using. So this has great performance even on metro networks. And most importantly, this core feature is built upon by things like DRS and all the other capabilities that use vMotion. So I think this will bring vMotion to a lot of more environments and really bring forward the promise of the software-defined data center. Now, we're also excited about VMworld to be able to show a lot of things that are going on as we head forward in the storage space. And I want to highlight a few of these that you can go see breakout sessions on. Now, we talked about a world where the majority of all applications are now running in virtual machines. But for the most part, storage arrays are still focused on LUNs, these abstractions that are really about blocks of storage. And if you think about it, as the world moves to virtual machines, infrastructure needs to have direct awareness, intimate knowledge about how these virtual machines map onto the storage arrays. That's what virtual volumes are about. These are vVols, as you might hear them. And we're working with our partner ecosystem to make sure that direct knowledge about where a virtual machine is filters all the way down into the hardware. This in turn allows you to do virtual machine-specific things such as snapshots and migrations in a very efficient way. Now, another big trend going on around storage is with the notion of flash. And so we're very excited about a project we have called Virtual Flash, which really begins to treat that flash that you might find on a server as really a tier 1 resource. And in fact, it'll look very similar to what you have today with CPUs and memory. You can put shares on it and limits and really make sure that all the virtual machines can get access to the flash in a very safe way. But we're also launching a set of APIs for our partners to work with. And so whether you're doing a storage appliance or some other sort of application running on top of this platform, we'll let you choose and eat from that same pool of flash that's there, and again, do so safely in a way that gives you the performance benefits that are there. And the last very interesting trend going on is really looking at new application architectures. This is things like Hadoop that require that your storage be very close to your compute. So moving forward, we're also going to treat direct attached storage as really a first-class citizen. These are the disk drives that are shipping as part of your servers. And we're going to apply the same software-defined data center concepts to them, where we can abstract them out, pool them together, and then automate them. So we call this distributed storage technology, virtual SANs. And I think this is going to be a really great way to just be able to add servers into your pool and have the compute and the disk capabilities just immediately be absorbed into it. And this will be a very good use case for a number of different needs in the storage space. So there's a lot of great details behind these. I'd really encourage you to check out the breakout sessions on each of them. Now let's move into network and security. And I think as many of you know, the industry is doing all sorts of things around this space right now. And there's a lot of reasons for it. You've probably heard about software-defined networking, which is really the core of the same message behind software-defined data centers. And there's a real reason that people are focusing on this new concept, and that is because networking has really lagged in many ways in the evolution to the cloud model of computing. there are many significant physical constraints that we all need to be aware of when we're wiring together servers. And this is a little bit dramatic in the way I've drawn it, but think about it as really most of you have rack servers that are set up, and they typically have a top-of-rack switch, maybe some sort of end-of-rack net hardware. And you might have some nearby hardware appliances that are also set up for intrusion detection or load balancing or firewalls. And then you ultimately have to have these tied together in something that can be fairly complex. And it can also be very limiting in terms of reconfiguration. So ultimately, the reason this matters is that if you're rigidly tied together between these different constraints, then you can't provision things as quickly as you like. And you can't repartition things as you'd like. And this efficiency and agility that get lost by that really restrict you from ultimately what cloud computing is all about. So it is these constraints specifically that are driving a new approach across the industry and thinking about software-defined networking. So what's very exciting for us is that in the VCloud suite, we're really delivering a lot of this core networking capabilities and the first instance of software-defined networking being used in a virtual environment in this way. So it has three components I want to call out real quickly. It all starts with the vSphere distributed switch. And this switch has been something that is running literally millions of ports of traffic through it every single day. But what we've done in this new release is really make sure that that switch is ready for prime time. So a lot of work on performance, a lot of work on making it highly available, but even some of the operational things you need, such as health checks and the ability to back up and restore configurations. So it all starts with this distributed switch and making sure that we can handle all the traffic from all the virtual machines, even as they're moving around. But even more important to the notion of this software-defined data center is how we manage all of these switches as they're going on across your data center. And this is where the VCloud network controller takes place. The job in life for this is to deliver virtualized, pooled connectivity to all of your virtualized data centers and all your virtual machines. And what's more, we're using this to deliver higher-end services as well. We have something called an edge gateway that allows you to plug in from your virtualized data center to the rest of the network and get access to these new higher-level services, L4 through L7 services along the way. And as Pat showed at the start, this is how we begin to plumb these network services directly into a virtualized data center as the core of what we're working with. This is also what's really core to what we're referring to as the next 5 days of getting an application up and running. What we want to be able to do is create this virtualized data center, and then we want to deploy an application into it. That application has a set of requirements that go with it. And these are things like what sort of network behavior it expects, what sort of security it has, but it's also those settings that it has to inherit based on where it goes into the pool. And so again, in this world, we can very quickly assign those different capabilities directly to the virtual machine. We don't have to think about the scalability limits of VLANs. We don't have to know what subnet we're necessarily on as we abstract all of them out. And that leads to the next discussion I wanted to bring up. Again, Pat mentioned VXLAN, which is something we talked about for the first time last year. What's really amazing as you go around the solutions exchange here and look at what's going on in the industry is just how quickly this concept of the VXLAN has been implemented in a lot of hardware and software. And as a reminder, VXLAN is really a way to think about the problems of having identity and location bound tightly together. This really separates them out and lets you think about the identity of a virtual machine without knowing specifically where in the network it is. So VXLAN is an open system, a very open ecosystem initiative here, and it really shows in what you'll see on the floor. Just kind of call out a few different things you need to think about as you're rolling out implementations this way. First of all is a number of server offloads that allow you to do the MAC and MAC encapsulation and really open it up and let things run very quickly. The switch ecosystem is also connecting a number of physical assets at the layer 2 natively to these VXLAN networks. So this allows interoperability in a very important way. At the top, you see a reference to the edge, and this is something VMware delivers at the edge of a virtual data center where a number of third-party services can also fit in. And these are at the layer 3 gateway network. And again, this allows interoperability as well as the use of higher-level services in a very fluid fashion. And then last but certainly not least is visibility so that you can know how well it's behaving and how the performance is doing. So a great set of monitoring tools that fit directly into these logical networks. So I really encourage you to learn a lot about the way that networking is moving, and I'll talk a little bit more about Nicira at the end of the talk. Now, the next thing I want to call it is the VMware vCloud Director. And this is something that's really core to the concept of the software-defined data center. Think about the job in life for this tool as being creation of the virtualized data centers, and then ultimately allowing virtual machines to fit into them. And we spent a lot of time in this release really making this a first-class citizen for the creation of the software-defined data center. So let's take a quick look here. Now, most of you have spent a lot of time in front of vCenter, and for all practical purposes, think about vCenter and vCloud Director as coming together with a common purpose here. The line is really blurred in day-to-day operations. And what we're delivering in this new release is a full-feature browser-based client. It has improved scalability, a big focus on performance and extensibility as well. And I just show you a very quick tour here. I've already seen a lot of you working in the hands-on labs and other places with this new user interface. But basically, you can log in, and here's where you're going to look straight at the resources, pulling together all the resources that you're ultimately assigning out to different virtual machines and to different virtual data centers. In this particular case, we're looking at a couple of the clusters, and these are the resource pools that you divvy out. But what's very nice here is, again, how we've tied these tools together. So with a right click, you can very quickly move into the infrastructure view of the world. This opens up your vSphere client. And then instantly, again, you're looking at the level that as an infrastructure administrator, you might want to be working with as you're really getting down into the depth of your data center. I think the balance tool here is something I particularly like. This shows if you have a balanced cluster and if things are running quite well. And you'll see this sort of attention to detail across the board in the new client that you're working with. I think it's an elegant design. I think it's very well executed. So you'll enjoy working with this. Those of you that work directly on our products spend a lot of time in front of these tools, and we want you to enjoy it as you're doing so. Now, another core part of what we've done this time is a very big focus on extensibility. And extensibility is more than just allowing something to punch into a space on your UI. A single pane of glass is very important, and it's something that makes you very comfortable. But we want things integrated even deeper. So with the extensibility built into the new tool, we have inventory and alarms and search that talk to all the VMware properties, but certainly they talk to any of the other things plugged in there as well. So the idea is to build and manage all of the aspects in your cloud from one place. So these are just a few of the partners that have committed to shipping their plugins this year. We have quite a few others that are underway, and I know if you walk around, again, the Solutions Exchange, you'll see how these control of these different parts of hardware and software in your data center can, again, fit very nicely into one view of the world. Now, this is a very interesting topic I wanted to bring up, which is another interesting addition to our client. This is a plugin that's downloadable, and for the first time now, we have the ability to manage other hypervisors from one single tool. Now, we firmly believe that the highest levels of efficiency will come with a pool of infrastructure all running homogeneous hypervisor, and certainly that means vSphere in our case. But we also recognize that there are other hypervisors that are popping up, and you might have small pools that are being used for test dev or something else. So again, we want to have an ability from a single pane of glass to be able to look at all of the different parts of your data center. And so the first version of support that we have in this is actually for Hyper-V. You can actually open up this tool, and you can actually connect to your Hyper-V servers. You can configure and manage them, and you can also configure and manage virtual machines running on top of it. This is something we've heard a lot of requests for, and I'm happy that we're able to deliver this as a download this quarter. Tepid applause. We'll take it over. That's just part of a broader heterogeneity story you'll hear as the course of this event goes on. Now, the other part of it is the UI. And delivering an enhanced UI and enhanced API was really part of the design goal for this suite. And the goal behind the vCloud API is to provide programmatic access to everything you have here. User interfaces use it so that they can give nice views, but a lot of the integrations we have with our cloud partners and our hardware partners are talking through the same API. What we've also done with it is certainly made it more robust and easier to program, but we also made it extensible in another way. So at a higher level, we're allowing companies to build services that fit directly into the model we're shipping with the VDCs. So what you'll see over time is that in the same UI model and the same API model, we can have things like backup as a service or database as a service that are coming in. But the important part about this, and the reason you need to use the vCloud API for it, is that you can inherit the permissions and you can inherit the multi-tenancy model as you're putting up these new services. And ultimately, this means higher level services that all fit into the model of virtualized data centers. Again, the end goal to think about here, though, is programmatic access to the software-defined data center that you've created with the vCloud suite. Now, really the bulk of what I want to talk about this morning, though, is management in this new world, or as Pat talked about, automation replacing management. So we all know that things need to change pretty dramatically in this world. We have a separation of applications from infrastructure, which is very good, but it presents new challenges for how you correlate things together. What you also see is that we have more data than ever, and we have things that are moving around with vMotion, with things popping up and going away. All these require changes to the way that we've been doing management so far. So what we're very excited to announce this morning is the new management suite that is really part of the VCloud suite and really brings the promise here. And there are actually 3 additions that are part of the suite, and there's one that is outside of the suite that we'll be talking about on the business management front. But rather than me keep talking a little bit, I thought it'd be fun to bring one of our senior engineers up on stage. So at this point, I'd like to welcome Kit Colbert to stage. He's one of our principal engineers, which is the highest level of engineer we have. He's also been at the company for 9 years, started by working on storage, vMotion, in many areas in the core, but now he works along with a lot of really strong engineers in the management area on delivering the promise that you can do through automation in this world. So please join me in welcoming Kit Colbert. Hey, Kit.
Hi, Steve.
All right. So I asked Kit to actually do some flips when he came out here, but I don't think he's ready for that just yet.
A little old for that, I think.
Okay, so we're just going to talk a little bit about the new tools that you and the rest of the group have been working on, and we want to start a little bit with service provisioning. So as we talked about, if you want to be successful in the cloud computing model, it all starts with giving your clients self-service access to their infrastructure. And giving them self-service access is pretty easy, but doing it safely, I think, is where things can be a challenge.
Right.
So why don't you give us a little flavor for how VMware Engineering looked at this problem and what we're delivering in the Cloud Automation Center?
Yeah, so self-service is an absolutely key essential component if you're thinking about cloud. And this goes back to something actually that Pat mentioned in his talk. He talked about how can we get service provisioning down from hours or days, like it is today, to minutes or seconds, which is really the goal of any sort of cloud, right? So what does it look like today? Well, if a user wants a new service, they go and they send an email or they file a ticket. Some other admin looks at that, right? And they say, okay, and they pass it along to the next guy who then will check it out, and if it passes all the policies and so forth, it'll be approved. And if it's approved, then it goes to some other admin who has to go and then actually do the provisioning of it, usually clicking around in the vSphere client, say.
Not the fastest process in the world.
Precisely, right. A lot of manual steps, and this is exactly why it takes hours or even days to provision this stuff. But we know that that's not what we want. We want it to happen in seconds, ideally. So what does that look like? Well, what a user does is he logs into a self-service user portal that's been pre-configured with all the applications and services that they have access to. They select one, they click a button, and it automatically goes into a workflow that goes and checks against the policies. If it's approved, it's automatically provisioned. So again, the notion here is we're taking the admin out of the loop and automating a lot of things that were previously done manually. And so this is really the goal of any sort of self-service model. And as I said, this is absolutely key and fundamental to the cloud. And one other thing I would like to mention here, actually, just while we're on the self-service topic, is that a lot of people believe that self-service is fundamentally incompatible with some of these process standards like ITIL, that you have to completely change the way you do business to use self-service. And we've actually found that's not necessarily the case. In fact, VCloud Automation Center, the product we'll talk about in a second, is actually very extensible to support whatever processes you have, and thus you don't need to fundamentally change the way you do business. So it's a really powerful thing. So let's dive into the product.
Yeah, let's look at the product.
Okay, so this is a screen that you'll get as a user when you come and log into the self-service portal. This is VCloud Automation Center, and what the admins have done in this case is pre-configured a number of applications and services that the user can then go and provision on their own. And they've set up all the policies up front so that they're not in the loop anymore when the user actually goes and requests the service. So let's zoom in here, and we can see some of the different applications and services that the user has access to. They can just click one, and again, if it's approved, it'll be provisioned. And that's pretty much it, right? Great. Now, the even better thing, though, is that they can go and manage it themselves after it's been provisioned. This is another really powerful aspect that previously the VI admin or someone else had to go and do this, but now it's all in the user's hands. Again, taking another thing out of IT, and they can go and focus on building the business.
No trouble ticket for this particular configuration.
Precisely.
Right?
Right. So that's really nice. So they have all the functionality from, you might see in the vSphere client. It's great. And they can also look at all the different resource utilization they have, what reservations and so forth, and see everything from a bird's eye view. So this is really great, putting a lot of that management back into the user's hands to allow them to do things themselves very quickly. The other really cool component here is the fact that you can provision to any type of environment. So it's not just vSphere environments anymore, but you can actually go out to external cloud providers like Amazon. And we now support vCloud director-based environments, both private and public clouds. So this is really nice. It's one way to self-service across all of your environments.
Right, so just to reiterate here, this is a product that we've taken from the Dynamic Ops acquisition. It's a way to provide self-service access for your users, but by keeping processes and approvals and workflows and even integrations with some of your other tools in place, and then ultimately giving you a choice as to where you ultimately deploy it. And maybe just to be clear, this works very well with vCloud Director. The two tools are complementary in that sense.
Yeah, and that's a very good point, because I think a lot of people are a little bit confused on that, right? They're like, well, do these things do the same thing? Are they different? And they actually are very different. vCloud Director is all based on aggregating and abstracting the virtual resource layer up into the cloud resource layer, and then doing provisioning on those cloud resources. While the product here, vCloud Automation Center, is really about automating all that on top of it and doing self-service on top of that.
Okay.
So yeah.
Let's talk about applications for a moment then.
Sure.
So amidst the discussion of all the infrastructure changes, applications are changing very rapidly too, and it's a big challenge for most IT organizations, of course. A lot of different applications. It might be Windows, it might be Linux, different places you deploy them, and of course a very challenging lifecycle management task. So why don't you give us a flavor for how we looked at this problem and what we're delivering in the new vCloud suite as well?
Right. Well, it's great that the vSphere team's been hard at work making sure that vSphere is a single place where you can run any application. And you just talked to this a few slides ago. So that's awesome. But now we have a problem on the management side. Where is there a single place to manage all those applications in the same way? Right? So today there's many different ways of doing application management. I've highlighted one example here, which is templates. Right. Now, if you've ever used a template, you know they're a little bit of a pain to set up, all sorts of stuff to configure and install, and then you create the template, and then you can deploy images from that template. But unfortunately, after these VMs have been created from the template, there's no real way of tracking them or managing them in any seamless way. So templates are okay for application provisioning, but we really want something that manages the full life cycle. So what we want to do is move away from this template model to something we're calling an application blueprint model. And the notion of application blueprints is actually to compose an application for a number of different components in a data-driven manner, set the settings, configuration options, and so forth, and then go and deploy those and manage them throughout their entire life cycle. So it's not just deployment, but actually ongoing management, updates, patches, unit tests, and so forth. Mm-hmm. That's the idea.
Okay, well, why don't we dive in and take a look at it?
All right. So this product is called vFabric Application Director, or just App Director for short. And this is a screenshot, it's really the main screenshot of it, and in my view, really captures the power of this. So what you see here is a multi-tier application. There are different boxes here representing different VMs or components of this application. Within each VM, there are many different components, many different middleware libraries, as well as the application bits, different operating systems, so on and so forth. And the cool thing is, if you look on the left-hand side or the right-hand side, you can see a whole bunch of other components. And literally, it's a drag and drop. So you can just move stuff in, and automatically that's added to become part of the application. So no more SSHing and editing random files and installing stuff. It's just a drag and drop now. It's really nice. Excellent. And the other thing that's really cool about this is that it supports not only your homegrown .NET, Java applications, and so forth, but also your enterprise applications like Oracle databases or Microsoft SQL or Microsoft Exchange, as well as both Linux-based and Windows-based VMs. So again, this is a single place to manage all of your applications, regardless of what they are. Now, once you've created your blueprint, the next thing you can do is set a bunch of properties. And I hinted at this earlier, this data-drivenness, right? So templates have this data in there. For instance, they have Java Home, right? But it's set in some random dot file in some random user's directory. And you have to go SSH in and try to figure out where it is if you want to update it. So it's a lot of effort. And you might miss one if there's multiple users and they each have their own Java Home for some reason. So right here is a single place. You go and you change the value, and then you're done. So it's really nice. It's all there front and center, easy to configure, easy to change, very easy to manage. And so this is really powerful. Now, once you've created the blueprint, set all your properties and so forth, you're ready to deploy it. And just like with vCloud Automation Center, you can deploy it to a number of different environments, a number of different clouds. You can do your internal vCloud Director-based clouds or external VCD-based clouds, and we also have support now for Amazon EC2. So again, really powerful stuff. Cool. Now, while creating blueprints is great and super easy, right? It's even better if someone else can create them for you. And so what we've done is created this marketplace. Think of it as an enterprise app store where third-party vendors, as well as maybe other users of App Director, come and upload their blueprints. And so what you can do is then download those blueprints into your local App Director and manage them just like all your other applications. So it's really nice. And here we see a bunch of different ones listed. We have a Hadoop here, for example. So yeah, very powerful, very cool.
Yeah, very, very nice. So that was just a real quick look at what we're doing around application management. Maybe just to reiterate a few points. So rather than manage a template, which is effectively a disk that you have to SSH into, that you have to actually rev and upload again, we're able to do a model-based design here. And I think being able to extract some of the variables that you set on deployment time, being able to choose where they deploy is really going to help our users. I really like this marketplace concept as well. Not only can you download things that vendors have set up, but I expect over time corporations, either within themselves or across corporations, can exchange blueprints. They can share best practices and really get a way of making sure they have the best deployment. So very, very nice stuff. Thanks. Now, the last area I wanted to talk about a little bit is something that's often overlooked as we talk about the cloud. Many people recognize how easy it is to get something into a cloud and start running, but then there can be a little buyer's remorse later on when you actually have to keep things running. So a real focus is on how do you manage the operations in this modern world. If you're on the data center side, how do I make sure the infrastructure has capacity and is running well? And if I'm on the app side, how do I make sure it's still satisfying what the users want from it? So I know this area you've worked particularly in. Why don't you give us a little more flavor for the problem and how we've addressed it?
Right, this is my specific area of focus here. And when you look at operations management tools, in my mind, they need to answer one seemingly simple question for you. And that is, what is going on? What's happening right now in your environment, right? I mean, what's going on? You're running 10,000 VMs, hundreds of servers. What is happening out there? Do you have performance problems you need to fix? Are some of your clusters running short of capacity? Do you have some unpatched VMs that need to be taken care of? Security updates and so forth? These are the sort of questions that an operations management tool needs to answer. Now, unfortunately, many of them don't answer that question very well today. And there's a number of reasons why. I've listed some of them here. Lack of visibility. Either the data's not very good or how they bubble that data up and show it to you is not very useful. Manual analysis. As our data sets get bigger and we're running more and more VMs, it takes longer and longer, and it's harder and harder for a human to understand all these interconnections between everything and to understand where the root cause is and what the problem is. And finally, tribal knowledge. Tribal knowledge is great, but it can be very incomplete, and it's certainly not scalable, right? You read something on a blog, and maybe it's right, maybe it's not. So we need to move away from this. The goal is to move toward tools that give you deep visibility into what the problem is, that have automated analysis, that do a lot of the work for you. Again, a lot of times it's finding that needle in a haystack. Out of 20 million metrics, 40 are important. Which 40? And how do you find that? The system's got to do it for you. You can't possibly do it yourself. And finally, best practices. Understanding the environment that you're monitoring and building that information into the system. So these are the key components that we need for any operations management tool.
Good. Let's take a look then.
All right. So this product is called vCenter Operations. We've had it out for a few releases now, and we're happy to announce the latest. And so I want to go over a few of the new features in it. So the first feature is one that we call custom groups. And so now you can use these groups as sort of an object type, similar to a host or a cluster, and get all your useful data on them. But when we go back to visibility, groups really are great in ensuring deep visibility because they give you views into your business, what's important for your business. For instance, your tier 1 applications, that could be a group. Or all of the VMs in your finance department, that could be another group. Looking at what are the most important things that are happening and what's impacted. Now, this is a bit different from folders in VC, if you're familiar with those, where a VM or some other object can only be part of a single folder. With groups, you can have one object in many different groups at one time. Again, because these are views of your environment, giving you that deep visibility. So it's really powerful stuff, and we're really excited to have it. So the next one goes toward best practices. VCOps is really good at bubbling up a lot of useful data for you, but sometimes if you're not a VI admin or haven't been using vSphere for quite as long, you may not understand some of the data that we're showing. So what we've done is we've added a link next to all sorts of different data, simply saying, what does this mean? You click on the link, and you'll get an answer to that question. It tells you, what does that metric mean? What's it measuring? What do you do with it? And if we can see here, what problems are associated with that piece of information? How do you know that you have the problem? And then how do you go and fix it? So that's really useful in reducing your MTTI.
Yeah, and I think this is a really important point, which is all the knowledge that people have, whether it's in VMware engineer heads, some of the blog writers out there, this is a place to capture it and have it available to you right when you need it, right when you see something's going wrong in the system. So you kind of get a little engineer in the box here with the tool.
Exactly. All right. So Steve, you talked about application visibility, and that is clearly something that's very important. You know, VCOps has been great at looking at the infrastructure layer, and what we want to do is extend that to be looking inside the VM to see what's going on with that application. So here what we've done is we're running an Oracle VM, and we can see the actual Oracle application statistics. This is really great because if you have a problem with this VM, the question you need to be asking yourself is this an infrastructure problem or is this an application problem? It really helps with that finger pointing exercise. And the final thing on VCOps I wanted to cover was this single pane of glass concept. This ability to see all your different environments in one view at a glance. And so what you see here is this dashboard that's fairly comprehensive, and as a matter of fact, is showing you 4 different clouds. 1 or 2 of them are internal, the other 2 are external. We have a few examples here, Amazon, BlueLock, and so forth, which are more American vendors, but certainly Colt, T-Systems, etc., here in Europe as well. These can all be plugged in, and again, all seen one dashboard, very seamless. So it's really powerful.
No, thanks very much. So again, this is vCenter Operations, one of the most popular tools we've ever launched. And we really brought a level of automation and deep analysis and even custom views into it. And I really do think this is exactly what this new software-defined data center world needs, is a new way of looking at management. And that's what vCenter Operations delivers. So thanks very much for coming on stage, Kit. And thank you to all the engineers who've delivered this new management suite for us.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks. Very neat stuff. So I wanted to highlight one other thing that's showing up in this new suite, which is the VCloud connector. And we've really put a big focus on this as the desire to have a hybrid cloud model really scales for many of our customers. So I want to make it very clear, we use the same suite of software as we deliver to our public cloud partners as the software that goes to our private data center customers. And this is really important as both of them drive us to have higher levels of automation, making sure that scale's in place. But it's also to allow compatibility across 2 sides for customers that want them. And so our public cloud ecosystem is alive and doing extremely well. And we have a highest end partnership that's called the VCloud Data Center Services Partner. Some great partners around the world, in Asia, in the US, and certainly here in Europe. And what we've been really focusing on is how can we connect things that you might have running in your private data center to these partners. And that's what this tool is about. The VCloud connector is about providing connectivity between the 2. And we put focus on 2 key areas for this release. The first is really interesting around networking. And we've really allowed us to do edge connections between the 2. You can really extend an L2 network to the public cloud. And this provides a great level of compatibility for having interconnection between applications that are expecting to be communicating within a data center. So very important, a good way to keep the applications running as you maintain their network configuration. And the other thing is around synchronization of the content itself. So as you create virtual machines or have templates or have your app catalog, we can automatically synchronize them with accounts that you have on the public cloud side of things. Again, make it very easy to spin up applications one side or the other, depending on what you might want to be doing then. I'm also excited today to announce for the first time the newest partner in this highest end partnership we have in OVH. So this provides yet another option for a very high quality data center service that you can get access to as you increasingly move to a hybrid cloud model. So welcome to OVH and thanks for joining the ecosystem. So that was a very quick run through of what a lot of you can spend a lot of time in breakout sessions going through. And that's the new VCloud suite, where we've just added a number of different management tools to it in the short months since it's been alive. And this really is the first suite to deliver on the promise of SDDC. We have a long way to go for the software-defined data center, but this is really an important first step. And Pat got a lot of applause for talking about VRAM pricing, or the lack thereof. We've really focused on trying to make this very easy to consume. And so just kind of a quick taste of this. It has all of these new capabilities in it, and we provide it in 3 flavors, if you will. You can buy the VCloud suite in Standard, Advanced, or Enterprise. And really, they're designed to grow with your particular needs. You could create a cloud for test and development, and as you get more comfortable, you're going to need more production features, all the way up to the end. But also what's very important is that we have a very important upgrade promotion going on right now, where if you're an enterprise customer on the vSphere side, you can move directly into the standard package of VCloud Suite for free. So this is a really exciting way for everyone to get started and really take advantage of all these new tools and ultimately deliver to your customers the cloud model that everyone's looking for. So now I want to follow up just a little bit more on the point that Pat mentioned about a multi-cloud world. And this is recognizing that within a data center or across data centers, there are different pools of infrastructure that you might be using. These could be your private cloud built on VMware, it could be a public cloud built on VMware, or it might be some physical assets, or it might be other assets that aren't running VMware software. And we really wanted to look at the key layers where you want interoperability between these two. So Pat briefly mentioned Nicira, which is our biggest acquisition to date. This is a great company. They pioneered OpenFlow and software-defined networking, and they're the leader in network virtualization for heterogeneous environments. I just wanted to reiterate, they've really focused on working well in the open source community, particularly well with folks like OpenStack, where they drive something called the Quantum APIs. And we're 100% committed to maintaining the relationship in that community. And if you think about it, networking by definition is the thing that needs to connect all the different things you might be running. And so we're going to focus on making sure it runs everywhere. And we're also doing some very exciting things we'll probably talk about next year in terms of pulling together some of the great capabilities on the VMware networking side of things with what goes on in the Nicira side of things. So a really important move, something very exciting as we really deliver on software-defined networking, which is core to everything we're talking about here today. You also just saw a lot of announcements from Kit as we talked through these management tools. And in many cases, they are addressing a multi-cloud world. You saw with VCloud Automation Center, you can set up a workflow that ultimately can send you multiple places. And that is key as you're making decisions as where things could run. What you saw in App Director 2 is that you can maintain blueprints that can have all sorts of different applications in them, but there's a deployment stage where, again, you can very easily choose where you want to run things. And we think particularly as companies want to store all of their applications as blueprints, making sure they can go anywhere becomes a very core capability. And then lastly, vCenter Operations. This tool by definition takes data streams from all sorts of different places, and we have plugins and different integration modules that partners have written that allow it to really have this visibility across whatever you happen to want to be using. So very key level at the management and orchestration and automation level as well. I want to highlight this one more time, as this is something that we've talked about for a couple of years now as well, which is if you are in this very heterogeneous world, there has to be one way to write applications that can be portable across all of them. And when we launched Cloud Foundry for the first time, we showed it running all sorts of places, completely open source and ported to a lot of different environments, including running on your local laptop. So we're going to continue to invest in Cloud Foundry as an open platform as a service and provide that level of application compatibility that we need. And then last but not least, I want to talk just a little bit about the business management concept and how that fits into this. If you're a CIO in a pretty big-sized company right now, you have all sorts of challenges. You have different infrastructures you're using. You have maybe a contracting firm, or you've outsourced something. And of course, you have not only your cloud world, but many other things. And so the other tool the other suite that we're launching today is the ITBM suite. And really think about this as just a CIO-level dashboard that's providing an ability for IT to run really like a business with more visibility than in the past. So it provides transparency and control into all of the different IT services. This is where you get information, again, on your cloud, but also on your BlackBerry handout, or on services you might be using from someone else. And again, it provides a very nice view so you can see how your budget is doing, how you're doing versus plans. But the reason this fits in quite well is that increasingly as you have choice where to put applications, you need some guidance as to how well and how efficient and how available different services are. And what's more, the cloud operations model that Pat referred to really talks about things such as benchmarking IT. And this allows you to actually do some very simple benchmarking across the industry. You can look at other companies your size with your level of complexity and compare your results to theirs. And ultimately, I think this will lead to some sort of cloud comparison shopping. You can really have a good feel for where you might want to go. So again, a very interesting new tool that we're happy to launch today, and I invite you to look into it a lot more. So we've talked about a lot today. We talked about the new suite as well as the way we're really embracing the multi-cloud options that are out there for customers. But I actually wanted to spend a little bit of time before we go off into all these sessions talking about the future a little bit. And we've done a ton today, but the future is very bright as well. And so I thought I'd close by inviting another engineer to stage who he brought this crazy idea to us a little earlier this year. He said, what if I could marry social networking with management of the cloud? We thought he was a little crazy, but we said, yeah, go for it. Give it a try. So why don't you all please help me in welcoming Ravi to stage, who's going to show us what his crazy idea is. Ravi? Hey, how are you?
Hi, Steve. Sorry, I can't do a backflip either, but let me show you what I can do and actually have done. Right. So I'm in the performance group at VMware, as you know, and I wanted to learn from social media to figure out how to make managing and monitoring your virtual infrastructure as easy as it is to monitor your friends on Facebook. So here I've got my virtual infrastructure, and I've got my social network powered by Socialcast. What I do first is I go ahead and add my virtual entities to my social network. And these are going to act as users, posting status updates, etc., as you would do in a social network. So if we can just cue the demo here to start adding entities. Thank you. So as you can see, all of my VMs and hosts are getting added to my social network, and they're going to go ahead and post status, etc. But they're not just getting added as entities. What I'm also doing is I'm discovering the connections between them, the connections between hosts, between virtual machines, between data centers, etc. And just like as in a social network, we can use those connections in interesting ways. Now let me give you an example of what I mean by that. Here we're going to highlight a host in our virtual infrastructure, and this host is running virtual machines. Well, in our social network, what would that map to? I'll show you the very same host, and first of all, you can see that in our social network, the users aren't just human beings, but also hosts and VMs. Let's go ahead and click on the very same host that was managing those two VMs, and we can see that its friends are those virtual machines. Now, this is not just a whimsical thing. We can actually use this, and let me set this up with a little bit of an example. When Michael Phelps won his 20th gold medal at the recent Olympics, he received a number of congratulatory messages and about 176,000 likes. Now, likes are a great way to consolidate and aggregate information. And we're going to go ahead and use that concept here. So what you see is that I've got a virtual machine that I've set up as an NFS data store right here. Okay, and I've connected a number of my hosts to this VM as an NFS data store. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and turn off that VM and therefore turn off that data store.
That seems bad.
That is very bad, but look at how easy it's going to be to figure out what's going on. As you can see, once we've turned this off, a number of hosts that are connected to that data store will be affected by the problem. The first host that gets affected will go ahead and post an update that says, hey, this data store just went down. Now, rather than getting barraged with a bunch of the same message from all of our other hosts, every other host will like the very same message. At a glance, you see exactly how many hosts are affected by this problem. But there's more. Channeling Steve Jobs here. Anyway, as you can see, we see the number of hosts that are affected, but when we click further, we can also see exactly which hosts are affected. So an IT admin can look at this and figure out which hosts might need some looking at. Now, we can take this social media metaphor a little bit further. So one thing I want to point out is that this is actually deployed in the hands-on lab over in the other building. And so I'm using this to monitor our hands-on lab and figure out what's going on. When you say something interesting in the keynote about some product, often there's a spike of activity of people going to the hands-on lab to perhaps use that product. And the virtual centers that are backing the hands-on lab see a burst of activity. As a performance engineer, I need to understand what that activity is. Now, you might have noticed when we showed all of the hosts liking the same issue that I had a hashtag, warning NFS. And as we know, in social media, the number of responders to a hashtag gives some indication of the popularity of that topic. Right. We can use that concept of popularity here. What I'm doing is we've started a load against the virtual infrastructure. So we've started a number of clones, a number of deploys, etc. For every task that I use, I associate it with a hashtag. So it's as if it's a topic. And so when the same task is executed multiple times, the same hashtag is seen, and you see an indication of the popularity of that task. We can use this information by looking at some of the analytics that we see within Socialcast. We go ahead and click on the tab that tells us, this shows us a graph of time and the number of messages that you see. And as you can see, once we started that load, there was a huge burst of activity. So at a glance, virtualization admin can see that his or her vCenter server is very busy. Now, as a performance engineer, I need to know the composition of that workload, clones, deploys, etc., so I can know which operations I need to optimize. And remember that each task that is being performed is a topic. number, the popularity of topic, the number of tasks being performed of that particular type. So let's go ahead and look at the popularity of those tasks by looking at the trends. Here I can see exactly which tasks are being performed. Now I know to go back and try to figure out how to make those tasks faster.
Got it, got it.
Now, we're only skimming the surface of this, obviously. If you want to learn more, please come to the Innovation Spotlight session later today, and I'll talk more about this.
All right, thanks, Ravi.
Thank you very much, Steve. Appreciate it.
I really like that. The metaphor keeps going on, and in addition to helping you manage your infrastructure, you can pretend you have even more friends than you do. So very good, good combination there. And as he said, it's actually in use in the hands-on labs, so we've actually used it to find some of the things going on. And speaking of the labs, I just wanted to highlight how cool they are again here. I was walking around yesterday looking at them and just filled with seats of people trying out the new products. This year we're going to do more than 8,000 lab hours, which is just amazing if you think about it. And in the course of doing so, we're going to spin up and use 60,000 virtual machines. And what's exciting for me about that is actually how we built this lab. And we've used a number of our partners, as always. So you're running these out of our public cloud partners. And what's also very important is that they're running on top of this VCloud suite that we've just talked about. And if you want to talk about customer zero, as we call it, this is our labs that are using this in a very demanding environment from the get-go to test out scale, test out responsibility, and make sure that things are really running as well as we like. Now, I really like labs, and I talk about this each year because it is my favorite part about VMworld. It's not only about the labs and where you're learning, but really it's about seeing everyone come together and talk to each other about what's going on. So whether you're a V-expert or in a VMUG group or just here for the first time, I really want to encourage you to reach out and talk to one another, because you'll learn just as much from doing that as you do from breakout sessions, from these labs and other areas. Really just a great part about this event. So on that, I wanted to close this morning's keynote and just reiterate what we've done today is launched a new management suite, which is really the core to getting everything you can out of the VCloud suite. Made it very easy to adopt the suite and very easy for you to really get on your journey to the software-defined data center. And along the way, we've also showed really how we can engage in a multi-cloud world and provide value and easy ways to navigate the waters that you're in front of. I really want to encourage you also to show up tomorrow. We have some very exciting demos and a very exciting way to talk about how we're going to provide access to these applications in the end-user world. So I promise you a compelling time then as well. So with that, thank you very much, and I hope you have a great VMworld.